Captain Elias Ward walked through the crowded corridors of the Lyran Central Market, his boots echoing softly on the polished metal floor. The market was alive with colors and sounds unlike anything on Earth. Ships from countless planets docked at floating platforms above, while vendors called out in alien tongues, displaying trinkets, foods, and technology that sparkled under the artificial lights. Elias had been sent as a human envoy to observe, learn, and if needed, negotiate. Humans were still new in these parts, and most species looked at them with a mix of curiosity and mild amusement. He moved carefully, aware of the throngs of beings around him. There were creatures with multiple limbs, some covered in scales that shimmered like liquid metal, and others with translucent skin revealing faintly glowing organs beneath. Despite the oddness, Elias felt a strange comfort in the chaos. He had grown up in a world where adaptability was key. Humans survived by thinking on their feet, by improvising, and he had already learned that skill would serve him well here. As he reached a central plaza, a sudden disturbance caught his attention. A group of alien merchants shouted in panic, scrambling to protect their goods. Elias' eyes followed a streak of blinding light, a projectile of some kind, that sailed across the plaza. People dove for cover, but he froze when he saw who it was aimed at. Princess Arya of the Solari Kingdom, elegant even in panic, was standing near a transport dock, her attendants surrounding her. Her white robes glimmered, and her calm composure was being tested by the chaos erupting around her. The shot that streaked toward her was not meant to kill, Elias realized immediately. It was meant to intimidate. But the weapon was fast and deadly, unlike anything humans normally encountered. Without thinking, Elias stepped forward, activating a small device strapped to his wrist. A transparent dome of energy expanded in front of him just as the projectile slammed against it. The blast rippled through the shield, sending Elias stumbling backward, but the princess remained untouched. She looked at him with wide, startled eyes, and he nodded, trying to reassure her. "Stay behind me," he said in clear, calm tones, though his heart raced. More shots followed, fired from positions hidden behind market stalls. Elias adjusted his shield, moving with practiced ease, shifting the energy to absorb the blasts. He had no formal combat training for alien weapons, but humans had a certain stubborn creativity that came in handy in situations like this. He ducked, rolled, and improvised, using crates and pillars as partial cover while the shield did the heavy work. The attackers seemed confused. They had expected chaos, perhaps to scare the princess or force her into submission. They did not expect a human to stand in her path, calm and calculating, protecting her with a device that seemed far too simple for such a complex threat. After several tense minutes, the skirmish ended almost as suddenly as it had begun. The attackers fled, their motives unclear, leaving behind damaged stalls and stunned merchants. Elias lowered his shield, breathing heavily, and looked at the princess. She had remained behind him the whole time, her face pale but her expression resolute. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice carrying over the quieted plaza. "I do not know who you are, but you have my gratitude." Elias shook his head. "I'm just a human. I didn't do anything special." But even as he said the words, he knew that humans had done something special, even if the aliens did not yet understand it. Humans survived, not always by strength, but by ingenuity, by empathy, and by a willingness to act when it mattered most. The crowd began to disperse, some still staring at the energy shield, whispering among themselves. Elias helped the princess into a safer area, away from the docks and the startled merchants. She moved with a grace that made it clear she was royalty, but there was also a quiet determination in her eyes, as if she had faced threats before and survived them. "I am Elias Ward," he said, offering his hand in a gesture of respect. "Princess Arya," she replied, taking it briefly. "Your actions, they were unexpected." Elias smiled faintly. "Humans tend to be unexpected." They walked together through the quieter sections of the market. Elias noticed how the locals watched them, some in awe, some in suspicion. The energy shield had left an impression, and he could tell that the Solari would remember that humans were more than they appeared. "You must have a reason for being here," Princess Arya said, her tone curious. "Not many humans travel alone in these sectors." "I'm here to learn," Elias replied honestly. "To see how others live, how they solve problems. Humans are new in this galaxy, but we have ideas. Sometimes they surprise people. The princess glanced at him, a hint of a smile breaking through her composed demeanor. Perhaps that is exactly what this galaxy needs. They reached a small, open garden, suspended above the market on a glass platform. Below, ships and people moved like tiny insects, oblivious to the drama that had unfolded earlier. Elias let the princess take a moment to breathe, and he watched her, noting the mixture of vulnerability and strength. She was royalty, yet in that moment she was just another person trying to survive in a chaotic world. "Do you often put yourself in danger for others?" she asked, her eyes studying him carefully. Elias shrugged. "Humans, we adapt. We protect those who need it. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't, but we try." There was a pause, filled only by the soft hum of the platform's energy field. The princess seemed to consider his words carefully. "You have a human way of thinking," she said finally. "Quick, flexible, fearless in ways my people rarely are. It is impressive." Elias felt a warmth at her words, but he stayed modest. "I just did what anyone would, I think. We survived together or not at all." She nodded, and for a brief moment, the distance between royalty and human seemed to shrink. The market, the chaos, the skirmish, all of it faded into the background as two beings from entirely different worlds shared a rare understanding. As they prepared to return to safer quarters, Elias felt a twinge of curiosity. What would happen now? The attackers had fled, but who had sent them? And why target a princess in such a public place? Questions swirled, but Elias knew one thing. Humans had a way of being underestimated, and that could be a powerful advantage. For Princess Arya, the encounter had opened her eyes to something new. Humans were unpredictable, inventive, and unafraid. They could act decisively when others hesitated. And for the first time in her life, she realized that perhaps a human could be more than just an ally. They could be a force capable of changing the course of events in ways her people had never imagined. Elias watched as she disappeared into the secure corridors of the Solari transport station. He lingered for a moment, surveying the plaza. The merchants were beginning to repair their stalls, the alien shoppers returning cautiously. Life continued, but it had been altered subtly by a human who had stepped forward when it mattered most. As he turned to leave, Elias felt a mix of satisfaction and anticipation. He had acted without thought of reward, simply because it was the right thing to do. But he could not shake the feeling that this encounter was only the beginning, that humans had a role to play in a galaxy far larger and more complex than anyone had realized. Above the plaza, the twin suns of the planet glinted off the metallic structures, casting long shadows. Elias knew that somewhere, far away, the Solari King and his council would be hearing of what had happened, and he had no doubt that they would be intrigued. Humans were new, unpredictable, and capable of remarkable things. Perhaps they were exactly what the galaxy needed. With a final glance at the bustling market, Elias activated his wrist device to retract the shield. The energy hummed down, disappearing silently, leaving no trace of the protection it had offered. And yet, the impression it had made would linger. The aliens who had witnessed it, the princess who had relied on it, and even Elias himself knew one undeniable truth. Humans were not ordinary. They adapted. They survived. And sometimes they could change the course of events simply by being themselves. Elias walked away from the plaza, his mind already turning toward the questions ahead. The galaxy was vast, filled with unknowns, dangers, and wonders. But for the first time in a long while, he felt a flicker of hope. Humans were small, fragile, and underestimated, but they had courage, ingenuity, and heart. And in a universe where those qualities were rare, they could be the difference between survival and disaster. He would wait, he decided, to see what came next. The princess had been saved, the immediate danger past, but the story was far from over. Somewhere beyond the stars, the Solari King would be considering his next move, and humans, unpredictable as ever, might just surprise them all. Days passed since the chaos at the Lyran Central Market, yet the memory of the human who had protected Princess Arya lingered in her mind. She walked through the crystalline halls of the Solari Orbital Palace, her footsteps echoing softly on the polished floors. The palace floated above a vibrant blue and green planet, shimmering with energy fields that kept it steady in orbit. It was a place of calm and elegance, far removed from the crowded chaos of markets and skirmishes. Yet even here, Princess Arya could not forget the courage she had witnessed. Word had reached her quickly, as it always did in the Solari Kingdom. Her father, King Talon, had been briefed on the incident almost immediately. The king, a tall figure with silver-streaked hair and eyes that seemed to see everything at once, had been intrigued. He was a ruler who preferred strategy over rash action and understanding over confrontation. When he learned that a human had protected his daughter with nothing but an improvised energy shield, his curiosity became more than interest. It became an opportunity. Late that evening, a sleek transport vessel entered the Solari Palace's docking bay. Its design was unfamiliar, different from anything Arya had seen in the kingdom. The hull glimmered with human engineering, functional, efficient, and elegant in its simplicity. From it emerged a human figure, tall and composed, carrying himself with quiet confidence. It was Elia's ward. He moved carefully through the palace, guided by attendants who had been instructed to escort him. The princess approached him as he entered the central hall, her expression unreadable but her curiosity evident. "You came," she said simply. "I did," Elias replied, his voice steady. "I was invited." Her eyes narrowed slightly, a mixture of caution and intrigue. "Invited by whom?" "By your father," he answered. "I think he wants to see what humans can do." They walked together through the hall, where light reflected off the walls in prismatic patterns. Elias noticed the subtle complexity of Solari architecture. The way each angle and curve had a purpose, each surface interacting with light and gravity to create both beauty and function. It reminded him that humans were not the only intelligent beings capable of cleverness, but he also knew that what humans lacked in history, they often made up for in creativity. At the end of the hall, they entered a larger chamber. King Talon awaited, seated on a platform that elevated him above the floor. He regarded Elias with calm, assessing eyes. "Captain Ward," the king began, his voice deep and resonant, "your actions in the market have not gone unnoticed. Few beings have the courage, foresight, and adaptability to respond as you did." Elias inclined his head slightly. "Thank you, your majesty. I only acted as any human would. We try to protect others when we can." The king's lips curved into a faint smile. "Your modesty is noted, though I suspect it is not entirely sincere. Humans have a certain flexibility in thought that we rarely see in the galaxy. You improvise, adapt, and act without hesitation." Arya watched silently, intrigued by her father's calm analysis. She had experienced many guards, warriors, and advisors, yet none had seemed capable of the ingenuity that humans displayed. Elias' actions were more than bravery. They were clever, creative, and most importantly, effective. King Talon stood, moving gracefully despite his age. "I do not make offers lightly, Captain Ward. I am prepared to give you a task that no human has ever undertaken before, a role in shaping the future of the Solari Kingdom and perhaps the galaxy itself." Elias blinked. He had expected curiosity, perhaps praise, but not an offer. "What kind of role?" he asked cautiously. The king gestured to the chamber around them. The walls were lined with holographic displays showing star systems, trade routes, and the positions of various fleets. "We face challenges that cannot be solved by traditional means. Our technology is advanced, our fleets formidable, yet we are limited by our methods. I believe humans can help us think differently. I want you to design systems, strategies, and tools that combine Solari capability with human creativity." Arya stepped closer, her interest piqued. "You want a human to change how we approach our work?" King Talon nodded. "Exactly. Humans see problems differently. Where we see rules, they see possibilities. Where we see limits, they see potential. Your presence, Captain Ward, is an experiment, but one I hope will succeed." Elias felt a mix of pride and apprehension. Humans had long been underestimated, their history short and their reputation untested. Yet here he was, offered a role not as a soldier or mercenary, but as an innovator, a chance to demonstrate that humans could influence events through intellect, empathy, and creativity. "I will do my best," he said finally. "I will need access to your engineers, your technology, and your knowledge of Solari systems." "You shall have it," the king replied. "But understand this, the task is not merely technical. It will require diplomacy, insight, and judgment. You will work with beings who have never known humans. They will doubt you, question you, and perhaps even resist you. Your ability to adapt will be tested." Elias nodded. "I understand." The king's gaze softened slightly. "Good, then you may begin." Over the next several days, Elias was introduced to Solari engineers, analysts, and scholars. They were brilliant, skilled in ways that humans could only marvel at, yet many were cautious around him. Humans had a reputation for unpredictability, and in a culture that valued precision, unpredictability was often seen as a liability. But Elias quickly demonstrated his value. When a complex energy relay system failed to synchronize, Solari engineers assumed it was a hardware limitation. Elias examined the schematics, then suggested a minor adjustment to the energy flow sequence. It was a simple change, almost intuitive, yet it restored full functionality. The engineers stared in disbelief. "This is unconventional," one of them murmured. Elias smiled. "Sometimes unconventional works better than following the book." Word of his success spread quickly. The Solari began to see that humans had a way of combining observation, intuition, and creativity to solve problems that others found impossible. Where Solari methods were rigid and tested, human methods were flexible and exploratory. Princess Arya often observed Elias during these sessions, fascinated by his approach. He did not rely solely on technology. He relied on understanding, reasoning, and imagination. He asked questions others might not ask, considered solutions others would dismiss, and acted decisively when hesitation could have cost precious time. One evening, they walked through the palace's zero-gravity gardens, where luminescent plants floated in the air. The stars shimmered beyond the glass walls, casting soft light across their faces. Arya spoke quietly. "You know, humans are different from anything I expected," she said. Elias chuckled softly. "I'll take that as a compliment." "It is," she replied. "You see possibilities we cannot. You adapt when others freeze. It is remarkable." Elias nodded, looking out at the stars. "We survive by finding ways. We make the most of what we have, and we try to help each other along the way. It's not always easy, but it works more often than you'd think." Arya considered this. "Perhaps the galaxy needs more humans then, not to fight, not to conquer, but to think differently." Elias smiled faintly. "Maybe we are good at surprising people." Their conversation was interrupted by a soft chime from the palace's central communications hub. A holographic display activated, showing the positions of nearby star systems and trade routes. King Talon appeared, his expression serious but calm. "Captain Ward," he said, "we face a challenge that requires more than technology alone. There is a negotiation underway in the Xylan sector, complex, delicate, and potentially destabilizing. I want you to observe, advise, and help our representatives approach it in a way that ensures success without conflict." Elias nodded, understanding immediately. Humans were often underestimated in diplomacy because they lacked centuries of formal tradition. But they compensated with intuition, creativity, and empathy, qualities that could turn tense situations in their favor without resorting to violence. "I will do my best," he said. "I have no doubt," the king replied. "Remember, your strength lies not in weapons, but in thought, in strategy, and in the human capacity to adapt. Observe, understand, and act wisely." As Elias prepared to depart for the Xylan sector, he felt a surge of determination. Humans had been underestimated for too long, dismissed as fragile and inexperienced. Here was a chance to show the galaxy that human ingenuity, empathy, and courage could rival the greatest powers in existence, not through war, but through intelligence and creativity. Princess Arya watched him leave, her expression thoughtful. She had witnessed firsthand what humans could do when they acted decisively and with purpose. She realized that humans could be allies not just in battle, but in shaping the future. The galaxy was vast, filled with unknown challenges, but with humans like Elias, there was hope that ingenuity and empathy could make a difference. Elias' ship departed, gliding silently through the orbital defenses of the Solari Palace. As the stars stretched into lines in the ship's viewports, he reflected on what lay ahead. The negotiation in the Xylan sector would be complex, but he trusted in the qualities that made humans unique. Observation, creativity, empathy, and adaptability. These were the tools that could tip the balance without a single shot being fired. And somewhere deep in the palace, King Talon and Princess Arya watched the stars in quiet anticipation, knowing that the arrival of a single human had begun to change their world in ways they could not yet fully imagine. For humans, this was not just a mission. It was an opportunity to demonstrate that courage and ingenuity, when guided by empathy and purpose, could redefine the galaxy. The galaxy had never truly seen what humans were capable of, and Elias was about to show them. Elias Ward's ship drifted silently toward the Xylan sector, a cluster of star systems known for delicate politics and unpredictable trade alliances. The negotiation he had been asked to observe was more than a discussion. It was a test of diplomacy, strategy, and subtle influence. And though humans were new to these sectors, Elias knew that his approach could make a difference. The Xylan capital floated above a green and blue planet, a ring of satellites and orbital platforms encircling the world like a crown. Ships from many species were already in orbit, some displaying emissary flags, others waiting quietly in the docking bays. Elias' craft was small by Solari standards, but it had advantages humans relied on: maneuverability, efficiency, and the ability to operate quietly. As the ship docked, he was greeted by a team of Solari representatives. They were cautious, their expressions polite but reserved. Humans had a reputation for unpredictability, and despite Elias' successes in the palace, many in the galaxy still regarded humans as untested. "You will lead the observation," one of the senior Solari diplomats said, her tone formal. "Your role is to assess the situation, provide guidance, and suggest non-confrontational solutions." Elias nodded. "I understand. I'll do my best." They moved into the central negotiation chamber, a large circular room with holographic tables projecting star maps, trade routes, and population statistics. Representatives from several systems were already present. The air was tense, though no weapons were drawn. This was a battle of minds, influence, and careful words. Elias studied the participants. Each species had a style, a rhythm, a way of communicating. Some were loud, gesturing widely and making bold claims. Others were quiet, speaking softly but with authority. Humans had a unique advantage here: the ability to observe patterns, notice subtleties, and suggest solutions that were logical but creative. The first session began, and chaos quickly emerged. Representatives talked over one another, negotiations stalled, and subtle threats of trade restrictions and sanctions hung in the air. The Solari delegation looked frustrated, unsure how to regain control. Elias leaned forward and spoke quietly to the lead negotiator. "Let them speak first," he suggested. "Listen carefully, find what each party truly wants, not what they say they want. Then offer options that satisfy those needs without forcing anyone to give up more than necessary." The negotiator raised an eyebrow but followed his advice. As Elias predicted, listening carefully allowed them to identify the real concerns of each party. One system worried about resources, another about travel routes, and a third about political influence. By understanding these needs, Elias guided the Solari representatives to propose solutions that addressed the concerns without confrontation. Hours passed, and slowly the atmosphere began to shift. Where once there had been tension, there was now cautious collaboration. Delegates started suggesting compromises, building on the solutions Elias and the Solari had presented. The room buzzed with energy, but it was no longer the tension of conflict. It was the energy of creation and cooperation. During a break, Princess Arya arrived unexpectedly. She had insisted on observing from a distance, curious about how humans approached diplomacy. She watched Elias, noting the calm efficiency with which he navigated the complex discussions. Humans, she realized, did not rely solely on force or authority. They relied on insight, empathy, and the willingness to act creatively in unexpected ways. "You are remarkable," she said quietly, leaning slightly toward him. "I did not think humans could handle something so delicate." Elias smiled faintly. "We survive by understanding people. That's more important than technology or weapons sometimes." Arya nodded. "Perhaps we underestimated humans." The final session of negotiations began as the sun rose over the Xylan planet. Elias had prepared a series of proposals that incorporated human thinking into Solari methods. One key element was modular compromise, offering each party benefits that seemed tailored to their needs but also reinforced collective stability. Another element was transparency, ensuring that all proposals were understandable, verifiable, and clearly advantageous. Elias presented the ideas calmly, guiding the discussion without dominating it. Delegates were initially skeptical, but the clarity and practicality of his suggestions won them over. Slowly, the atmosphere in the room transformed. Representatives who had argued stubbornly now nodded in agreement, recognizing the fairness and creativity of the proposed solutions. Hours later, a final agreement was reached. The parties shook tentatively at first, then more firmly as trust grew. No threats had been necessary, no force applied, only human ingenuity, careful observation, and thoughtful guidance. When the session concluded, the Solari delegation praised Elias openly. "Captain Ward," one diplomat said, "you have done what few could. You have guided us through a challenge that could have led to conflict, and instead, we have achieved understanding and cooperation." Elias felt a quiet satisfaction. Humans were often underestimated in this galaxy, seen as weak or inexperienced. Yet here they had succeeded where many seasoned civilizations might have failed. Princess Arya approached him again. "Your work here, it shows that humans can change outcomes without fighting. You think differently. You act differently. It is inspiring." Elias shook his head modestly. "I just do what comes naturally. We try to find ways that work." Arya smiled. "It is more than that. It is remarkable. Perhaps humans are exactly what this galaxy needs, not as warriors, but as thinkers, problem solvers, and guides." As they returned to the ship, Elias reflected on the events. Humans had survived and thrived for thousands of years not because of strength alone, but because of creativity, courage, and collaboration. These qualities had allowed them to navigate the negotiations successfully, turning potential conflict into cooperation. In the days that followed, news of the successful negotiations spread. Aliens across the sector began to take notice of humans, not for their weapons, which were limited, but for their ingenuity and adaptability. Humans became sought after as advisors, mediators, and innovators. Elias returned to the Solari Palace, greeted once more by King Talon and Princess Arya. The king regarded him with a rare smile, his eyes gleaming with approval. "You have exceeded my expectations," King Talon said. "Humans are indeed capable of remarkable things. You have changed not only the course of this negotiation, but the way my people view humanity." Elias bowed slightly. "I am honored, Your Majesty. Humans are not perfect, but we adapt, we observe, and we find ways to solve problems." The king nodded. "And that is precisely what is needed. I would like you to remain with us, Captain Ward, as an advisor and innovator. Your perspective is invaluable, and I believe it can help us shape the future, not just of the Solari Kingdom, but of the galaxy itself." Elias' mind raced with possibilities. The offer was unprecedented. Humans had never been given such a role in galactic affairs, let alone a position where their ideas and creativity were valued above force or tradition. He realized that the galaxy was finally beginning to understand what humans had always known, that courage, ingenuity, and empathy could achieve what weapons and power could not. Princess Arya smiled at him. "It seems the galaxy is ready to see what humans can do. And perhaps with your help, we can build a future that is stronger, wiser, and fairer for all." Elias nodded, feeling a deep sense of purpose. Humans had often been underestimated, overlooked, and dismissed. But now they had the chance to prove that intelligence, creativity, and cooperation could change the course of events, influence civilizations, and build a galaxy that valued more than strength. As he looked out at the stars from the palace observatory, Elias understood that this was only the beginning. There would be challenges, disagreements, and complexities ahead. But humans were resilient, adaptable, and capable of extraordinary thinking. And in a universe that often relied on force, that would make all the difference. King Talon approached, placing a hand on Elias' shoulder. "Remember, Captain Ward, humans have a gift. It is not in the strength of their arms, but in the power of their minds and hearts. Use it wisely, and you will change the galaxy in ways we cannot yet imagine." Elias nodded. "I will, Your Majesty, I promise." Princess Arya joined them, her gaze steady and confident. "Together, perhaps humans and Solari can guide the galaxy toward a future we all desire. One built on understanding, creativity, and trust." Elias felt hope swell within him. The galaxy had not yet seen the full potential of humanity. They had survived, adapted, and thrived in countless situations. And now, they had the opportunity to demonstrate that true power lay not in weapons or dominance, but in courage, ingenuity, and empathy. As the three stood together, gazing at the stars, Elias knew that humans had found a place among the stars, not as conquerors, but as architects of understanding, as builders of cooperation, and as beings capable of changing the galaxy simply by being themselves. The universe was vast, complex, and full of challenges, but humans were ready. They had survived, adapted, and acted with courage and creativity, and now the galaxy was ready to see what humans could do. For Elia's ward, for Princess Arya, and for the Solari Kingdom, this was the beginning of a new era, a time when humans could show that even in a vast and unpredictable universe, intelligence, empathy, and courage could shine brighter than any weapon, brighter than any fleet, and brighter than any fear. And somewhere across the stars, the galaxy watched, beginning to understand that humans were extraordinary, and that their story had only just begun.